All right, last time we're learning this the Dvar Malchut of the Rebbe, the royal words. The Rebbe of Lubavitcher, the Rebbe, of course, as we said so many times, is the Moshiach. He has all the qualifications of being the Moshiach. And he is the Moshiach of our generation. And if somebody else wants to be a Moshiach, it's 100% okay with everybody. As soon as the Moshiach can come, better. But there are criteria for Moshiach that the Maimonides puts. And to our knowledge, the only one that has these criteria are the Rebbe, but could be maybe there's somebody else hidden, some could be. And he says, whoever the Moshiach is, you have to follow whatever he says, you have to learn what he says, and you have to follow what he says. So you have to take his attitude. So what is the Rebbe saying? The Rebbe is saying that everything in the world has a meaning to it. And let's take an example. The second Rebbe of Chabad, he was born and passed away on the same date. He was born on the 9th day of Kislev, and he passed away also on the 9th day of Kislev. What was it, 50-something years later? So the Rebbe said, so what? What's so important? So he said, well, it's important because, sometimes God wants to show the importance of this physical world and of time. So time itself has a message. Therefore, God, he fills the days of the tzaddikim, of righteous people, from day to day, because this completion of a tzaddik, of a righteous Jew, has to permeate and be reflected in the physical world. I mean, if a tzaddik is born and dies on a different day, it doesn't show anything lacking. It just says that once in a while, God wants to show the importance of the physical world, because this whole idea of the physical world is composed of time and place. It's divided into days of the week, of the year. Like the rabbis say, when God chose the world, when God chose to make a world, so God also made a beginning of the world. That's Rosh Hashanah, when we Jewish people celebrate New Year's. That's when Adam was created. But God also set the heads of every month. The months also. God set the beginnings of the months and of the years. Every month has its beginning. It can be one of 2 days. Either the month is 29 days or 30 days. And of years. When God chose the Jewish people, Yaakov and his sons, then God made a different date, namely Passover. The first month became Nisan, 6 months away from the creation month. God chose the Jews. He made the month a different month, the month of Nisan, when God took the Jews out of Egypt. Hainu shekavios hashanim. So the setting up of years is connected to God's world. Benigud l'kavios rosh chodesh shel geula. When God decided that there was going to be a month of redemption, this is not connected to the world. The connection is to Jacob and his sons. What does it say? When God chose to make the world, so he made the beginnings of months, etc. When God chose the Jewish people, so he made a month of redemption. Shana, when God made the world, as Shana, he made Shana, which that's Shana is from the language of change. Milashin mishaneh mekifa v'kolelet b'tocho kol hashinoi. that the year contains in it all the different changes of time. Possibly if you live in some places, it's not so much, but in Israel, for sure. Right? You have there's the winter months, rain comes down in winter months. Rain never comes in the summer months. Right? It's and in America also, it's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter. All the changes, some people want to get away from the changes, so they go to Florida, where one of those they go, but even there's also changes. That's what the year is. And therefore, mitvatet shleimus avoda shel tzaddik, therefore the complete service of a tzaddik is that also his years are complete. Not just his Judaism is complete, but also his physical years, that God sits and he fills the physical years from day to day. And namely, that every day he uses it for the ultimate completion. Every day becomes like a garment for that godliness in that day. Like it knows that if it's missing one day, so there's missing one garment. Days of a person's life are set for what type of garments he completes after a person dies. Garments. Kach, also the shlemus and tamimus at tzaddik, also the completion of a tzaddik is that the physical life will be equal to his spiritual life. The physical life will be one continuation of his spiritual life, just like he is pure, as his days will also be pure. So in other words, time is also a creation. It's not something we live inside of. Time is something that is part of the world that we are responsible for. Right? Like we said before, the whole entire creation, the most important thing in creation is man. And man is here in order to serve the Creator. So when you serve the Creator, so you're fixing up everything in creation, and part of creation is time. Maybe we can say the Kivan Lashon HaGomorrah, the language is God sits and he completes the days of tzaddikim from day to day. It's not making any conditions in the tzaddikim. It's just saying that God himself takes care of this. This is God's business. We can say that this completion is by every tzaddik spiritually for sure. A person that devotes his life to trying to do the best he can to serve God. So therefore, God himself completes spiritually what he's doing. But moving al pianel, we can understand this, that this also is expressed in the physical world. That this adds on a new type of completeness, even more. This is even the true completeness of a tzaddik is when not only spiritually he's 100%, and also physically, but also temporally in time, that God fills the days physically in the days of the tzaddikim. So therefore, some tzaddikim, righteous Jews, their days are exactly full. It comes out to an exact year, an exact date. This was revealed also by Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. In the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, it says that some people, the one opinion says that in Nisan, that in the month of Nisan, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were born, and in Nisan they all passed away. By Moshe Rabbeinu, by Moses, it says, the day that he was born, the 7th day of Adar, was the same day that he passed away. That's the same day he was born. In addition to that, in addition to the fact that he had 120 years he lived, since that because he was a shepherd of the Jewish people, and especially Moshe, that Moshe was the faithful shepherd of all the Jewish people, as there was by him the completion of the service of a tzaddik, as it was in the fact that his days were also complete. So this we can also see the same thing about the second Rebbe of Chabad. All the other Rebbe's of Chabad, it was not so. The day they were born, the date they were born, and the date they passed away was not so. But the second Rebbe was. He was the Moses of his generation, and we'll learn about this. Why are we talking about the second Rebbe of Chabad? Because this date that he was born and that he passed away is the 9th day of Kislev, which the 9th day of Kislev comes out to be what next week, right? On Sunday, let me just have a look. Let me have one swallow. Here we go. It is Shabbos, this coming Shabbat. This coming Shabbat will be the 9th day of Kislev. The explanation is like this. It's connected to this week's Torah portion. Vayetze, and also Vayishlach. Vayishlach is, we read this in Mincha of the coming Shabbat. That in both of these Torah portions, Vayetze and Vayishlach, Yetze is talking about how Yaakov goes and he goes to Charon and he meets up with Lavan over there, and Lavan tries to trick him a million times. And it ends up that God helps him and he comes out rich and with all the 12 tribes. And Dinah also. And 4 wives. And Vayishlach is talking about how he meets up with Esav. So, but in these 2 Torah portions, we see something amazing. Ikar Sipur, the main story in the Torah about what Jacob did, who Parshas told us. It was last week. Last week it talks about how Yaakov was in the house of his father in the land of Israel, Beersheba. Parshas Vayetze, it's talking about how Jacob went out from Beersheba. He went out from this holy place where his father worked so hard to make it holy, and Abraham and Yitzchak. Vayelech Charona, and he went to a place called Charon. Al Yitzias Yitzchak, Yaakov, when Yitzchak left Beersheba into Charon, and Charon is called the worst place in the world. Charon Af Shel Makom. It is the blazing anger of God. And if there's any place in the world that makes God angry, it's Charon. Worst place in the world. Everybody there was trickers and cheaters and liars. Maybe not as bad as Sodom, Gomorrah. I mean, that God you couldn't fix them up. But Charon was a close second. And he went to Lavan Arami. He went to Lavan, who was a charlatan, a trickster, a liar, a con man. The place was terrible. The person was terrible. Yaakov, in other words, left the most beautiful place in the world that Abraham and Yitzchak got big blessings, and the place was called Beersheba because there was an oath that was made there, and etc. He went from this wonderful place in the land of Israel, and he left to go to a place called Charon. That's why it says that Yaakov was afraid. The Yaakov says was afraid, and God had to promise him, "Ushmarticha, I will." We learned about this yesterday in the Chumash class. And even more, not only did God just send him down there to test him, like Abraham went down into Egypt and he was tested, right, by God, that Paro took his wife, etc. But Yaakov went down into Charon in order to flourish there. That Yaakov got married there, and he had all of his children there, of the Shvatim. Yesod Shalom Yisrael, the foundation of the Jewish people. And even after Yaakov finished his service by Lavan, and he wanted to go back to his father's house, V'shavti v'shalom beis avi, like he asked God to promise him that it would be, and afterwards God said, go back to the land of your fathers. But not only did Yaakov not do what he was promised, yeah, but he was not able to do what God promised him. But not only did Yaakov he's not able, as soon as he had these these children and the tribes, to immediately go back to the land of Israel. Matchil rak hasipur shel Yaakov im Esav. That's next week's Torah portion. Yaakov is on the way going back. All of a sudden he meets up with Yishlach Yaakov Malachim. That Yaakov, that's next week's Torah portion. Yaakov hears that Esav is coming with 400 men. He wants to kill him with all these details. And only after next week's Torah portion, the Torah tells us that Yeshiv Yaakov be'eretz Megoreh, that Yaakov went back to Israel. Okay, this does not make any sense. This whole story about Yaakov and the service of Yaakov, and Yaakov was one of the fathers of Judaism. He was a chariot for godliness. And God is the king of the whole world. God creates everything constantly. He's creating Lavan, he's creating Esav, he's creating... Yaakov is not only just one of the three founders of Judaism. He's the Bechur. He's the chosen one. Yaakov, he should have stayed in the land of Israel. He should have given birth to all of his children in the Holy Land, in a holy environment. It should have related, if the Torah wanted to tell us that he went down to Lavan and he went to Esav, even if the Torah wants to tell us that he gave birth to the children down there, it should have been short. This is the Torah. We're talking about the Torah. It's not a history book. This is the Holy Torah. It should only deal with holy things. If it wanted to tell us about Yaakov and the terrible things that happened to him, say it in a couple of sentences. Yaakov went down after Yaakov. Yaakov met with Lavan, and he fought and he succeeded, and then he went to Esav, and it was very difficult, and he tried to kill him, but he did not. That's it. A paragraph. But it should have been in the land of Israel. The main thing the Torah should tell us about the Torah, about Avram Yitzchak. The Torah tells about Abraham and Yitzchak, that's the main thing. Abraham and Yitzchak was in the land of Israel. Why did Yaakov, the majority of the space that the Torah gives to Yaakov, is talking about what happened to Yaakov outside of Israel? Not only that, in the worst places possible. But the explanation is, Alpia Yadua, like it says, Maiseh Avo Simon Labanim. What Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did is a sign for us. Moving, we can understand that what Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did is a sign for us, and it also gives us power. A little bit of power, like a sign, but it gives us power. Like a sign, a little note, but it still empowers us. Moving is understood, just Sipur B'Torah, story and the Torah of the deeds of Yaakov with Lavan and with Esav. This must be a very important sign and a teaching for us. What? Through the stories of the Torah about Yaakov Avinu and Parshas Vayetze, this week's Torah portion of Vayishlach, that this is the first time in the Torah that it speaks in such details on the service of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the world. How each one of the 12 sons was born and what his name was and what Lavan tried to do to him and what Esav. This Torah teaches us. Torah is the language of teaching. Horan Lador is a teaching for us, all the generations, that the ultimate purpose of a Jew is to have an effect on the world. And it teaches us also how you should have an effect on the world. Yaakov, first of all, Yaakov went out from Beersheba. If you remember, we learned yesterday in the Or HaChaim, actually I went over it pretty quickly, maybe I'll do it today. In the Or HaChaim, HaKadosh, the holy Or HaChaim, in the Torah portion, and he brings this down also in his way of understanding this, very beautiful. And the Rebbe is going to say pretty much the same thing. That Yaakov went out from Beersheba and he went to Charon. This talks about, in general, the descent of the soul into the body. The soul is in a wonderful place, and God brings it down to this terrible body that has all these desires and lusts and fears, and right, a person can be bribed. The soul of every single Jew, it says in the Shamash Nastata B'Tahora, it's pure, and it comes out from Beersheba. This is the aspect of Bina. God's what's called God's understanding. This is the be'er. This is the wellspring from which come the 7 emotions. The be'er is the wellspring of the sheva, of the 7 emotions of Atzilut, the highest of the levels of godliness. And it comes down into Charon, this last the aspect of Malchut, until it finally comes down into the worlds of Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, Ata Barata, Ata Yatzarta, Ata Nafachtabi. We say this in one of the first blessings we make in the morning, statements we make in the morning. Until we get to this world, this physical world, excuse me, physical world and mundane world, Charon of Shalom, the world that can anger God. It's full of klippas, sitracha. The world is full of opposition to the Creator. That's why God made it. And they conceal and they hide over godliness. And they hide over kedusha v'ruchniasa. They hide over the spirituality and the essence of the soul. And even more, the world can lazik liyudi. It can actually damage a Jew, like Yaakov was afraid. But the intention, the reason why it was brought down so low is in order to, so that a Jew would overpower all these concealments on the physicality of the world, and not only should he defy and not be affected by the world, but more, even more, that he should build a house, he should transform, he should build a holy house. Like it says, mitatosh lemo, it says that Yaakov, all of his children were complete. That's what it means, the piyotov neshama baguf, that namely the soul while it is in the body. That's like Yaakov coming down from this holy place into Charon. The same thing, the soul, when it comes down from a holy place into the body, it can reveal by means of doing Torah and the commandments, the light of the soul. And by means of this, it transforms the physicality and the crassness of the world. And it can actually bring about that the physical world will be surrendered and secondary and a vessel to the messages inside of it, like we talked about before in Torah Or, until the person's physical body becomes united with his soul, so that the body becomes a vehicle for the soul. Could feel like it was hinted at in the beginning when Yaakov went out. Vayetze Yaakov meber Sheva, vayelech. He went. What does it mean? He went. He went to Charon. That specifically by means of this terrible place called Charon, which is also a symbol for the soul coming in below. That it makes vayelech. It makes him, the soul becomes a mover. It becomes dynamic. It becomes activated. Like God says that the difference between the angels and people is that the angels are standing in one place and people can move. And even more, vayelech Charon, that he makes Charon, this low place, he makes it move. He elevates it. That the service from below, this causes vayelech, even in Metziah, that it enlivens and puts holiness even into Charon. Charon av shel makom, the place that arouses the blazing anger of God. Makom means God. Therefore, it says vayelech leCharon. It says that he went to Charon. That then the intention was that Yaakov should go into Charon. But this going into Charon, this low place, there still remained him and Charon are two different things. That wasn't the goal. Not that he went to Charon, but he went Charona. That it hints that this going spiritually into this place of Charon means that it elevated Charon itself. And we can add, that this is hinted at also in the additional hey in Charona. Like it says, the rabbis, the world was created with the letters hey and with the letter yud. In other words, by means behei yud, I think that behei. I think the world was created with hey. In other words, by means of Yaakov leaving his high and holy place, his comfort zone, his holy zone, Mi Beersheva, and he went to Charon, he revealed in Charon this letter Hey, Charon Ha, of the name of God. That the world was created with this letter Hey, namely the power which enlivens and creates the world was revealed there in Charon. Even the people in Charon realized that God is keeping them alive. Like it says, the power of the Creator in the creation. That namely that the creation will recognize the power of the Creator until the creation, the nifal, reveals that it is only just a power of the Creator. This whole world is not just secondary to God. You realize that this whole world is actually a creation of God. It's a creation of the Creator of the universe. Incredible. That this is mitbateh b'tziur anifal. I think we talked about this before, but I just want to say it in a short way. Sometimes they find, a guy goes into the pawn shop, and he brings an old shoe. And he says, "What you want with this old shoe?" He says, "Take a good look at the shoe." He says, "I don't even want to touch the thing. What are you, some sort of a joker?" He says, "Take a little bit of a look over here." He says, "Ooh, look at this. It says over here, the shoe, William Shakespeare. This was William Shakespeare's shoe. The shoe that was used in this play, the famous play, which was called The Shoe of Venice. And he used this. I don't believe this is it genuine? I'm going to call the experts in. They look, this is a genuine shoe. This shoe was actually worn by Shakespeare when he wrote the play called The Shoe of Venice. And this thing is worth $8 million, $10 million. He says, what are you talking about, $10 million? I have an appraisal that this thing is worth $50 million. Because it was on his foot when he went. It's the same thing with the world. The world is such a disgusting low place, like an old dirty shoe. But as soon as you realize that this is being created right now, that God has his foot in it, this is God's shoe, the whole world. Oh, it's tremendously valuable, every detail. So that's what he means. He went to Charon, that he elevated, he showed it, Charon, that Charon is being created by God. And that God is creating it for a purpose, and that they're not fulfilling this purpose. That's what it means to reveal the power of the Creator in the creation. That was the job of Jacob, to go to this low place, and that's the job of every Jew, to make this world realize what it really is, that it's a creation of the Creator, and the Creator is infinitely more valuable and real than Shakespeare. As we'll continue, God willing, more tomorrow. Let's learn the Yom Yom. Okay, we say that when you wash your hands after you finish eating, you're supposed to wash your fingertips a little bit. And while they're still moist, you pass them over your lips also. And then that's you do before you make the blessing after eating. After you eat bread, there's how much bread you have to eat, how fast you have to eat, there's laws. But if you eat the proper amount of bread and in the proper amount of time, so you have to make an after blessing after the eating. It's 4 blessings. It's a command from the Torah. But before you do it, the custom is to wash the ends of your fingers a little bit and pass them over your lips. And that's today's lesson. Have a good day with Moshiach now. God willing, 3 o'clock, we're learning Chumash.